by the time I was in it for about 15 months, I really recognized that I'd made some bad decisions. I didn't like being a criminal. I didn't even like acknowledging that I was a criminal. And so people around me started to get in trouble. And so I just wanted to start my life someplace else.
We found as a team, Michael Santos, when we were watching a Million Stories video. And if you haven't watched Million Stories, not only does Michael have a phenomenal story, you're about to hear it here, but also their Faceplant series that he's a part of is about this idea that you can change. You can have things that go badly for you. And Michael's had, as you're about to see, a lot of stuff go badly for him. And you can change your life around. You can change things. And so for tonight, we created a link just so I can say it while people are watching, because I wasn't going to be able to put the whole thing on the screen. StackyBenjamins.com/faceplant. So go to StackyBenjamins.com/faceplant. But you know what? We'll have the direct link on our show notes page at StackyBenjamins.com. But enough about that. I would introduce him to you more, but I want him to tell you a lot of his story. Ladies and gentlemen, let's say hello to our next guest, Mr. Michael Santos, joining us.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Super excited to be here with your team.
Well, you made yourself disappear from society for 20-something years, right?
Yeah, some bad decisions as a young man put me in the crosshairs of the criminal justice system and gave me 26 years of free room and board.
Right, fantastic. Let's start at the very beginning, Michael, because I'm curious. You're a kid growing up in Seattle. You're from what seems like a great family, like a average family. You were helping out with the business and didn't really love helping out with the family business?
Yeah, I didn't quite have the good character to stick with my father's immigrant story of coming to America and working hard and building a great business. I got a little bit influenced by the fast life. I saw this movie, Scarface, and didn't quite get the meaning that at the end of this movie, you're either going to end up dead or in prison. And as a result, I just started moving down this path that put me into some very complicated situations.
I want to stop on Scarface for just a second, because I saw Scarface, and for people that haven't seen Scarface, there's a scene there partway through the movie, Michael. Well, you know the scene very much, where a guy they handcuff him to a shower, and they take out a chainsaw. And bad stuff happens. Like, yeah. For me, if I watch Scarface, that's the main scene I remember from Scarface. But that scene didn't faze you at all?
So I remembered a better scene was when he was picking up the Porsche 928. And I said, oh, that's what I want to do. So we tend to see what we like to see, particularly when we have all the wisdom of a 20-year-old, which is what I had back in 1985 when I saw that movie. And like I said, it just led me down this rather lengthy path of about 18 months of moving to South Florida, wrongfully believing that if I didn't get caught with cocaine, I wouldn't really be breaking the law. So I put other people in between me and the drugs, and it didn't work out so well for me in the end.
Did you start with drugs in Seattle, or did you fly to Miami to get involved?
Well, I saw the movie. My father's from Cuba. So as they showed on Faceplant, my father's from Cuba. I had a friend that his father had escaped with my father. And I just figured since he'd grown up in Miami, he must know somebody. So I just called him on the phone and did market research that way and just asked, what is the price of cocaine in South Florida? And I learned it. And then I found people that were kind of in this fast life that I was running in when I was 20 and tried to find out what is the price in Seattle. And that little bit of market research convinced me to make the trip to South Florida, and within 24 hours, I was a drug dealer. So
you were plugged in.
I was plugged in. Yeah, I called the guy. I said, "You must know somebody." He says, "Of course, I live in Miami," and he introduced me to people. And days later, I was trafficking, and it lasted for about 18 months.
That's what I was going to ask. How good was the money?
Well, for a 20-year-old, it seemed like a lot, but when you amortize it out and you figure, well, you're going to do 26 years in prison, it's really not great.
It seemed better then than it does now, is what you're saying, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I was really blinded. This was before we really launched the war on drugs. Like I said, this was in 1985. Ronald Reagan was in the White House. In my limited vision during the recklessness of youth, cocaine kind of had this glamorous feel to it for me. And I believed that if I wasn't touching it or storing it, I wasn't really breaking the law. And so I would just have my friends pick it up and deliver it. And of course, that exposed me to much more serious complications with the law.
Yeah, that's interesting because you always thought being insulated, that one step would insulate you. I mean, and it's funny saying that now. Like whenever I see you say that line, you kind of have like this eye roll. Like, yeah, I thought then.
Well, I was really. There's nobody that's responsible but me. I mean, I made my decisions. I never say that I made a mistake because I knew what I was doing. I was trying to engage in this quick money scheme. And it was a bad idea, and it cost. I regret what I did, but it sent me through prison where I had an opportunity to reinvent myself, to recalibrate, and work towards striving to make amends.
B Moral has a comment that I thought was kind of funny. He says, "Does being a Miami drug dealer come with a good 401k match?" Probably.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Probably not. Did you ever feel like, Scarface, right? Violence, all this stuff. Did you ever feel like you personally were in danger?
No. I only, there were all kids like my age, 20 years old that were, from suburban backgrounds that, this was before the proliferation of gangs. And I mean, there was certainly a lot of violence, but there was no guns in our case. It was just all suburban kids involved in something wrong. And when people got caught, they pleaded guilty. They did the right thing, pleaded guilty, and they cooperated against me. And I was the one that didn't cooperate, and so I got a 45-year sentence.
Yeah, and I want to ask that because, man, my blood kind of boiled when I saw that. I mean, it sounded a lot like bad financial advisors, bad lawyers. Like you had what seemed like the worst. But before we get there, at some point you felt threatened because you fled. Tell me about the decision to flee the country. Could you feel that you might get arrested at that point? Why did you leave?
Yeah, it's a funny thing. I grew up in an immigrant family and, always working hard and wanting to be something that I guess I wasn't. And so that, I think insecurity is what led me into that path, as they showed so well on the Faceplant episode that A Million Stories published. And so I just decided to run down this path. And as a result of running down that path, I got involved at a high level really quickly. When by the time I was in it for about 15 months, I really recognized that I'd made some bad decisions. I didn't like being a criminal. I didn't even like acknowledging that I was a criminal. And so people around me started to get in trouble. And so I just wanted to start my life someplace else. And I went to Spain thinking that would be a place to reinvent my life.
Well, that's what I was thinking. Even when I was hearing your story, I was watching the video and for the first time getting introduced to you, and I saw Spain. I'm like, that sounds great.
Yeah, it was. I mean, everything was an illusion for me at that time in my life. And I just didn't fully appreciate the magnitude of harm that I was causing, not only to the people that were abusing drugs, but also to my family and the people who cared about me. And then when I got caught, I went and made a series of more bad decisions. I didn't accept responsibility. I didn't plead guilty, even though I knew I was guilty. I went to trial and just really dug myself into a very deep hole.
Yeah. Tell me about just briefly when they finally came. When you got back to Miami, and I'm just imagining
I was
knock on the door.
I was in Spain. I called my attorney because I had an attorney on retainer. I just said, "Is everything okay?" He said, "Yeah, it's fine." I came back to the United States, and I may have been in the United States for 2 weeks or so. And the DEA came to. I lived on Key Biscayne, and they came to the place that I was living, and I could see their windbreakers with the DEA emblazoned on their back. And they just told me to put my hands up, and that was it. That was August the 11th, 1987. I had no idea the complexity of crime that I was involved in, but I was facing a sentence of life without the possibility of parole. I didn't know what that meant. I'd never been arrested before, but I was taken into custody that day. on Key Biscayne on August 11th, 1987, and I was incarcerated for 9,500 days.
Man, and I'm just imagining what's going on in your head at that time. But your lawyer tells you to fight it.
Yeah, well, my lawyer, I mean, there are a lot of great lawyers, but when you have a kid like me that was somewhat arrogant and really wanted to believe that I wasn't going to go to prison, you'll have some lawyers that will tell you what you want to hear rather than what you need to hear. What I needed to hear was, you've made some bad decisions. It's time to recalibrate and make amends and accept responsibility, and you're going to go to prison, but you can resume your life. I didn't hear that message, and as a result, I made every bad decision a guy could make. And I was convicted at trial. I perjured myself on the stand, exposing myself to a longer sentence. And at the end of the day, my judge sentenced me to 45 years. But at the time that I was sentenced, there was a different sentencing scheme in place, and it resulted in me serving 26 years.
Everybody has a low point where they know that things just have to change. When did you have your low point, and walk me through that?
I was inside the Pierce County Jail in Tacoma, Washington. It wasn't until I was convicted, till a jury returned a verdict of guilty on all counts. And I just went back and I was in a solitary cell, and I remember lying on my rack and just putting my hands behind my head and staring at the ceiling and not believing that this is going to be my life. But I had to accept it at that moment. And at that moment, I start to pray, and it was those prayers that led me to a philosophy book. And like I said before, I didn't know how to spell philosophy. I think I said that on the Faceplant episode. But I'm reading this story of Socrates, who was facing a death sentence and waiting for his execution. And his response to that really changed my mindset and helped me realize that what I need to do today is stop thinking about the bad decisions that I make or what's happening to me, and start thinking about people like you and the audience of Stacking Benjamins, and saying, what, if anything, can I do to make amends and start working my way back, or climbing my way back to a life of liberty and contribution and meaning.
This is the amazing part of the story, and I absolutely love this. What's the first thing then that you did on your path to redemption, really redemption of yourself or for yourself?
So great question. I remember reading this story of the Crito of Socrates inside of a jail cell and feeling so inspired. I hadn't been sentenced yet, but I felt so inspired after reading that story that I got up and I took this little pencil, right? I mean, this bit of technology, a little smaller than this, because this would have been a weapon in the jail. So I took this pen and I started writing letters, and I wrote a letter to the newspaper that had been covering my trial. And I told them I'd made a lot of bad decisions and I was going to change my life. And every day that I serve in prison, I'm going to work toward making amends. And I articulated this plan that I kind of learned from Socrates, that by thinking instead of what I want, what's happening to me, I start thinking about what, if anything, could I do to earn liberty or to earn freedom. And it came across with this three-pronged plan that guided me through every day going forward after that.
Is there a beginning approach to Socrates, or a book that you can tell our audience is a great place to start to grab hold of this for themselves?
Yeah, well, Socrates is really a lot about the translation, and because it's written in 2,500-year-old Greek. The Penguin translation is what I read. I still have a copy of it here because it had such a monumental impact on my life. So the Penguin translation of the Republic is phenomenal. It really helps a person learn how to think. And for your audience who's really always learning how to reinvent itself and build a stronger financial background, I think that always begins by asking good questions. And so if we read Plato's Republic and you get into this story of the dialogues, we really learn how every decision we make opens opportunities or presents threats. The SWOT analysis, what are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? Our opportunities and our threats? And really, we'd like to think of that as being a modern recipe for success in this era. But the reality is that's the same thing that Socrates taught, is really identify how you define value in your life and what can you do to get there. And that's what I learned from that book. So it's the most powerful book for me was The Republic by Plato. Life-changing.
You started off, and let's bring in OG and Bobby Rebel again, because they'll have some questions too for you, Michael. But I wanted to ask about your degrees, because you set out. My understanding is you set out. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you set out to get a bachelor's degree. You end up with a PhD. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I want to clarify that. I was in prison. I read this story of Socrates. It made me come up with this three-pronged plan that said every day that I serve in prison, I'm going to try and reconcile. And I thought, what do I need to do to reconcile? And that was three things. One was, people in society would want me to educate myself. That would be one way that I could show I don't want to be a criminal anymore. So I focused on education. The second was finding ways to contribute to society in meaningful, measurable ways. And three was to build a strong support network. That was like my three-part plan to make it through. And so I started writing letters because I didn't have any money. So I started writing letters to universities and just saying, I made really bad decisions. I'm in prison. I'm serving a 45-year sentence, but I want to be a law-abiding citizen someday. And can I go to school? And, you send one letter, no response, 10 letters, 10 times better chance of not getting a response. But if you send 100 letters, you get a response. And I was really blessed to get an opportunity to study. And I earned my undergraduate degree in 1992. Then I wanted to go to law school. I started writing to law schools. They told me that, you can't do that while you're in prison, maybe when you come home. But one of the schools, Hofstra in New York, was very supportive. And they said, we admire what you've done, because I'd already got my undergrad. And they said, you can, on a probationary period, we have more flexibility with a master's program. And they asked what I'd like to study. I said, I really think mass incarceration is one of the greatest social injustices of our time, and I want to learn about it and see if I can have some influence on improving our nation's criminal justice system. And they allowed me to begin a program. So I got my master's at Hofstra. While I was doing that, I was publishing a lot. And one of my publishers was the dean at University of Connecticut, at Storrs, Connecticut. And I got into the PhD program there, and I did my first year, but then the warden blocked me. So I didn't finish the PhD. I only did the first year toward a PhD. The warden blocked me, saying that taxpayers didn't want people in prison getting PhDs.
Really?
But
Really?
good news. There's always good news. There's a flip side to that. That's what put me into the market. And, and so I started investing from prison, and changed my life.
How did you, well, first of all, there's some money. How did you start investing in prison? How do you have money?
So great question. Like I said, I was writing a lot, and I became an author. So, earning minimal amounts of money from prison. I would, this was the dawn of the internet, and this is like the mid 1990s. Really believed that the internet was going to change the world, and wanted to have a role in it. And so one of the ways that I could do that was by investing, because I had never, I couldn't access the internet. I could read about it, and I'd been reading a lot and studying a lot, and I really believed it was going to have a huge influence. So I started investing. And at the time, the PayPals and the Googles of the day were actually Yahoo, America Online, and Amazon. And this was, like I said, 1998. I started investing and using margin and leveraging my way, and traded millions of dollars from a $2,000 investment using margin, and reached a peak on April the 12th, 1999, made more than $1 million in prison when I still had 13 years to go. So completely changed my life. The good news is it taught me a lot, but it also taught me that investing was not going to be my pathway to success. But it did give me some great learning lessons, and I can walk you through those if you're interested.
Well, wait a minute. Why is that not going to be your pathway to success? Clearly, you're good at it.
Well, no, there's a difference between being good and being lucky, and I'll take luck every time. So I invested in, like I said, I kept leveraging my way at Yahoo and America Online primarily, but then really started getting involved in high beta stocks like At Home Communications, CNET Technologies, I remember, DoubleClick, which eventually became Google. But leveraging my way up, and then because I was in such highly volatile stocks and heavily leveraged, I had $1 million in equity in April, but also $1 million in margin debt. So $2 million portfolio. And it was really skyrocketing. There's a hyperbolic move. But when the market crashed, the first internet 1.0 before 2.0, what goes up goes down like a brick. And those highly leveraged stocks quickly imploded. But still, it was big enough to change my life because I started with nothing. And after I paid my tax from prison, I still had more than 100 grand in the bank. And that really changed my life. It allowed me to get married and build a new career, which has been incredibly fulfilling.
Bobby, you have some questions about that.
I thank you so much for sharing your story. I was so impressed with everything that you've done. You have been more productive and more profitable than many of us in quarantine. So thank you for the tips. I hope everyone sort of gets motivated. We talked about showing up. The timeout is over at the top of this show. The timeout, I mean, if we need anything to inspire us to get going, you've definitely delivered tonight. So thank you so much for that.
Since quarantine. Here, I mean, really great businesses,
like
phenomenal
what?
businesses that
Tell
are
us.
just killing it
Well,
right
tell
now.
us. Tell us.
So I have a website at prisonprofessors.com. And one of the things that I do is I create digital content that I sell to jails and prisons across America. So more than 100,000 people go through my courses in jail and prison, where I'm just basically teaching one of the courses I call the CEO mindset, which is really identifying success, documenting a strategy, creating tools, tactics, and resources, and then executing the plan every day. And I document it by creating these videos that I publish on our YouTube channel. But then I put them on flash drives or on a cloud-based system and send them into jails and prisons, where people in jail and prisons, they're overly represented by people of color and people that don't have opportunities. My message to them is there's not going to be a lot of job opportunities for when you come out. I'm going to teach you how to think differently and start preparing yourself an entrepreneurial mindset. And so that's been a really phenomenal business for me, where I'm in, every state prison in California, several federal Bureau of Prisons facilities. But that led me to do something else because I started interacting with so many formerly incarcerated people that didn't have jobs. And if you look on my website now, I've built this whole new contributors page where I'm building a business for government investigations that helps small and medium-sized business owners understand that have nothing to do with law enforcement, but help them understand how decisions in the course of business, sadly, leads many people into very costly government investigations and sometimes white-collar crimes. So our team could go in there and help people, and it's a very lucrative market. It's a great niche, and I'm really bullish on it.
The thing that, and I don't know where, I don't know if it was in the Million Stories video, Michael, or if it was elsewhere, but part of the reason you're really passionate about this is when you were getting out, somebody said something to you about how lucky you were, how different you were. I don't remember exactly what happened, but I remember thinking, I can't believe somebody would say that to you. Tell that story if you know what the hell I'm talking about.
Well, I mean, I know a lot of people. I've met a lot of people in society that are in, a prison that's, I think, bigger than one that I was ever in. And they didn't break any laws, but they didn't. The way that they think keeps a lot of people boxed in, and they can't be. Something like a national pandemic or global pandemic happens, and their life just spins out of control. But the reality is, all of us have the power within to find a way through, and it's just discipline, and it really starts, as I said, by defining success and learning these strategies that leaders like Socrates or Mandela or Viktor Frankl or Warren Buffett or Steve Jobs or Bill Gates. Steve Jobs had a great quote. He said, a good artist copies ideas, but a great artist steals ideas. And since I was in prison, I just stole ideas from all these great leaders, and they really helped me transform my life. And I do feel lucky, and I do feel fortunate in so many ways because, I've been able to weather the storms of human life, and life is like a journey, and I've learned that from leaders, both fictional and non-fictional, and they help me grow. So I'm lucky. We're all lucky.
We're about to take questions from you guys hanging out with us. So bring your questions. I know we have a few. I'm going to flip back through those here in a second. But OG, you had a question, I know.
I'll tell you what. Thank you for your story, Michael. I appreciate that. And if you needed some motivation to put one foot in front of the other tomorrow for whatever reason, and you can't get it out of your story, something must be wrong. The thing that really struck me, you were talking about how you finally figured out that you made some bad decisions And at that point in time, you just kind of came to acceptance with that and said, okay, that stuff's in the past. It is what it is. Here I am. And now I have to make different decisions. And it really struck me because from a money perspective, sometimes we get so tied up in like, oh, I can't get out of this, or I may, and thinking about like debt or a bad relationship that ruined some stuff, or, I went to school and I've got hundreds of thousands of dollars of student loans and I don't see a way out of this. And we see this on the show a lot. I think that the biggest message, and what I heard you say was, it's okay. This stuff's in the past, and now you just have to make different decisions moving forward, and be okay with the new decisions. And it didn't take you a long time to, or it did take you a long time to get into this trouble. It's going to take you a lot of time to get out of it too.
But we all can, and that's the empowering message that I think that is that we're all resilient. We all have challenges in life, and we all can create lives of meaning and relevance and dignity if we can really adhere to that principled path of identifying what is success for us. And I hear from Bill Fligard, what has life been like after leaving prison? Well, Bill, thanks first of all for answering the question. But every day is a dream, of course. I mean, I live here in a beautiful community in Orange County, and I'm married. I got married in prison. I've been married now for 18 years. And I have just opportunities that every day I feel blessed, and every day I feel fortunate, and I have the great fulfilling job of being able to work with people who are in challenging situations and show them a pathway to make it through. And that's what I do every day. So it's exciting.
You've spoken a lot about prison reform, books about prison reform. Mike has done some classes, I believe he said, at a community course for 4 semesters at youth prison in Camarillo, California. He asks, how close is the correlation with education reduction of recidivism?
Easy for you to say.
It totally is in our prisons.
Yeah, it's very clear that education is really, in my opinion, as close as we're going to get to an elixir to the prison system is helping people that have been marginalized and frequently struggle through intergenerational cycles of recidivism. So they really come into the world without a lot of opportunity or chance, or situationally they go into the prison system. And the irony in prison, we call it a system of corrections, but the longer we expose somebody to corrections, the less likely that person is to function in society. So education is really the only pathway that can change it. We've got to learn how to think differently. We've got to learn, if we're in prison, we've got to learn how to be very intentional with regard to the people we associate with. And we've got to learn how to really live a values-based, goal-oriented life. And truthfully, anybody who's been in prison, in my mind, has a duty and a responsibility, if you become successful on the other side, to go back in. So I go in a lot. Of course, during the pandemic, the way that I do it is virtually, but I have been in prisons. And the funny thing, when I go into prisons now, I'll go in suited up, and they'll look at me like I'm, a lawyer or a probation officer or something. And someone say, that fool was never in prison. And I said, you think you're giving me an insult because I don't look hard enough? But there's a little secret in that. That was the plan, to come back and be able to function out here. And that's what I try to teach other people how to do.
That is fantastic. I'm so happy you were able to hang out with us and share some of your story. Where can people reach you, Michael?
I think the easiest way is through prisonprofessors.com or our YouTube channel at Prison Professors. But I am really super easy to find on Google. If you just know my name, Michael Santos. I do want to recommend, again, that people visit the amazing story that the Singleton Foundation produced at millionstories.com on Faceplant, because they just offer so much great education for people in your audience that are striving to build economic security. And in this era of a pandemic, it's super important to focus on opportunities to grow.
Yeah, I agree. Your story, Glozell's story, there's so many cool stories there, and they do such a great job. For people that don't know about the Million Stories people, these people are all Hollywood professionals. And so they take these videos, and I've been telling everybody, Michael, like the best 9 minutes you can spend is watching Michael Santos' story. It is a great 9 minutes. So we'll have a link, by the way, again, to Million Stories also, and to find Michael on our show notes at stackingbenjamins.com. Man, it was so great to meet you. Thank you so much for sharing some time with us. I really appreciate it.
Super grateful to Bobby, OG, Doc G, and you, Joe, and the entire team at Stack and Benjamins. We'll hope that you guys all find success and have a fabulous holiday season.
Thank you, man. You too. You too.
Thank you.
Let's bring Doc G back in here. Wow. How is that?
Talk about hope. Let's think about this. Like, we have all gone through something in life, right? We've all hit our own version of rock bottom. This guy was looking at 45 years in prison. And what did he do? He read something that inspired him, and then he took one step at a time. And I don't know if there's any better explanation of what you do when things are really bad. But this guy created a life for himself in a place where I think most of us would have probably given up. It's a good story, and taking one step at a time. And if you can do that, you can end up in a better place.
Well, and most people do give up. You know, I mean, you just don't hear, Bobby, you don't hear his story coming out of prison.
No, and look, we didn't get into the fact that he got married too much. He talked about it a little bit, but we didn't talk about the fact that this is somebody that he reconnected with that he knew earlier in his life. He's been married 18 years. I'm not sure how many years has he been out of prison. So, I mean, how many years of that was he in prison? I mean, the fact that his vision was so compelling that, you know, he was able to fall in love with, you know, to have this marriage be successful. And it just seems so wonderful to have that whole life. And he really thought forward. It almost reminds me of, you know, those, you know, when they tell you to think about your future self, you know, there's no apps that'll make you look old, even before you're old. But, you know, it almost feels like he looked at his future self while he was in prison and said, what do I want this future me to look like and for my life to look like? And I want to have, you know, a family, and I want to have, you know, financial security, and I want to have a mission, a purpose, which is all the things that he's doing. I mean, he talks about them as businesses, which they are, but they're very much businesses with a purpose. I mean, he is definitely out there, you know, helping the world. It's not just about the money. And he's very flip about the fact that he, you know, lost the paper money from the stock market. What he seems to clearly care about a lot more is the businesses that help people.
Absolutely. And OG, it comes back, I think, to your point when Michael was here that, what's that phrase? The past does not equal the future. And no matter what we're facing, you can change tomorrow. Yeah. It's just, you know, tomorrow is however you want it to be, right? I mean, it's just, it's not here yet. So you get to decide what you want it to look like. Such an amazing story. I'm not easily impressed, but that's impressive.